The sound of the slap lingered in the air, sharper than the crack of firewood splitting. For a moment, everything froze. The drummer stopped mid-beat, hands suspended above taut animal skin. A child who had been chasing a tire down the dusty street stumbled and stopped. A woman carrying a calabash of palm wine dropped it, the clay shattering into 100 pieces. Even the evening breeze seemed to pause, as if ashamed of what had just happened. Okonkwo stood still, his cheek burning hot, his chest rising and falling in silent defiance. His uncle's heavy gold rings had cut a faint line across his skin, but the real pain was not in the flesh, it was in the humiliation. Chief Ease, tall and broad in his embroidered agbada, looked down at him with eyes that carried both anger and pride. His voice thundered, loud enough for all the gathered villagers to hear. "Okonkwo, how dare you come to my house to beg for school fees? Do you not know who I am? I worked for every kobo I have. Nobody gave me handouts. If you cannot rise by your own sweat, then remain where you are." He turned sharply, his beads rattling against his chest, and stormed back into his mansion. The tall iron gates creaked, then slammed shut with a metallic clang that echoed through the compound. Silence. All eyes turned to Okonkwo. He did not cry. He did not speak. He simply stood, lips trembling, jaw clenched. His hand instinctively touched his cheek, then dropped. His pride would not allow him to show weakness. From the crowd, an old woman whispered, "Chai, so this is gratitude. After all Chief Obi did for him." Another shook his head. "Wealth can make a man forget the soil he came from." The villagers began to disperse, murmuring as they went. Some pitied the boy, others mocked him. But one thing was certain, they would not forget what they had seen today. Okonkwo finally turned and walked away, his bare feet dragging in the red dust. Each step felt heavier than the last. He wanted the ground to open and swallow him whole. Behind him, the music never resumed. That night, the village lay quiet under the soft glow of the moon. Crickets sang in the bushes, and the smell of roasted yams floated in the air. Okonkwo sat alone beneath the old Udala tree, the same tree that shaded his father's grave. He rested his back against its rough trunk, staring at the mound of earth where his father lay. He spoke softly, as if the dead could hear. "Papa, is this what you wanted for me? To stand before your brother and be disgraced? You gave him everything. You sold your last land so he could go to school. You carried his burden when he was nothing. And now, look, your son, your only son, has been turned away with a slap." His voice broke, but no tears came. He pressed his fists into the earth, the soil grinding into his skin. "I swear, Papa, I will not beg again. Even if I choose stones to survive, I will not bow to him. I will rise. And when I rise, the world will know that Okonkwo is his father's son." A breeze rustled the branches, as if in reply. By morning, the market square was alive with gossip. Women gathered around baskets of tomatoes and peppers, whispering behind their wrappers. "They said Chief Ease slapped him in front of everyone," one woman said, lowering her voice. "And that boy did not even cry," another added. "He just stood there, proud like his father." A man selling cola nuts shook his head. "The gods are watching. Wealth can blind a man, but truth never hides forever." Okonkwo walked through the market, his chin raised. He heard every whisper, every half-hidden laugh, but he refused to bow his head. If anything, the humiliation had carved something new into his spirit, an unyielding determination. He went straight to the lorry park where traders loaded yams and palm oil onto trucks bound for the city. The work was rough, the pay small, but Okonkwo did not hesitate. "Boys, who will carry these yams? Quick, quick!" shouted a trader. "I will," Okonkwo answered before anyone else. All day, he lifted heavy tubers onto trucks, sweat soaking through his thin shirt. His back ached, his arms burned, but he did not stop. While others rested, he kept working, determined to prove, to himself more than anyone, that he was not broken. By late afternoon, his hands were blistered and his legs shaky. But when the trader tossed him a few naira, Okonkwo smiled faintly. It wasn't much, but it was honest. It was his. As he carried the last load, he noticed her again, the woman in fine clothes. She stood at the edge of the market, not blending in with the villagers. Her wrapper was bright, her jewelry subtle yet expensive, her eyes sharp. She was the same woman who had stood silently the day before, when the slap silenced the village. She watched him again now, her gaze thoughtful, almost calculating. Okonkwo felt her eyes on him but said nothing. He wiped the sweat from his brow, nodded at the trader and walked home. The whispers still followed him, but so did something else, a strange new strength. That night, lying on his bamboo mat, he whispered to himself, "The slap closed one door, but another will open. I will find it." And though he had no way of knowing, the woman who watched him had already begun asking questions about him. The slap that humiliated him was about to open the first of many doors. The sun rose over Umuaka with a soft golden glow, painting the red roofs and thatched huts in light. Roosters crowed, goats bleated, and the sound of pestles pounding yams echoed across the village. But amidst the everyday rhythm, there was a new energy in the air, a story traveling faster than the morning breeze. "Have you heard? Chief Ease slapped his nephew in front of everyone." "Ah, so it is true." "Yes-o. The boy came to beg for school fees. Instead of help, he got a dirty slap." The news spread from compound to compound, from the palm wine tappers to the women fetching water at the stream. Some told it with pity, others with laughter, but everyone shared the story. Okonkwo, however, carried himself with quiet resolve. The sting of the slap remained, not on his cheek but in his heart. Yet, instead of crushing him, it sharpened him. He woke earlier than usual that morning, washed his face in cold water, and tied his father's old cloth around his waist. Standing before the mirror, a cracked shard of glass nailed to the mud wall, he whispered, "Today I begin again." The lorry park was already buzzing with activity when Okonkwo arrived. Traders shouted, drivers honked, and boys ran in every direction, chasing work and money. Okonkwo joined them, his lean frame blending in, yet his determination set him apart. "Boy, carry these baskets," a woman barked, pointing at a pile of oranges. "I'm here," Okonkwo said, bending to lift them before anyone else could. All day he worked without complaint. The pay was small, but each coin felt like a step toward freedom. By midday, his shirt clung to him with sweat, but he stood taller than the day before. Yet, unknown to him, he was being watched again. At the edge of the park, the mysterious woman from the city stood under a flamboyant tree. She was dressed in a modest gown this time, but her aura of wealth still lingered. She observed Okonkwo closely, her sharp eyes narrowing each time he lifted a load twice his size. A trader noticed her and whispered to his friend, "That woman again. She doesn't look like she belongs here." "Shoo," the friend hushed him. "She's from the city. Who knows why she's watching the boy?" By evening, when the trucks rumbled away and the dust settled, the woman finally stepped forward. "You there," she called, her voice steady but commanding. Okonkwo turned, surprised. "Me?" "Yes, you." She walked closer, her sandals crunching against the gravel. "What is your name?" "Okonkwo," he replied, unsure whether to bow or stand firm. She studied him. His eyes were tired, his body weary, yet there was a fire within him, a defiance she rarely saw in village boys. "I saw what happened at your uncle's house," she said plainly. "The slap." Okonkwo's chest tightened, shame threatening to rise. He clenched his fists. "I don't need pity," he said quickly. The woman smiled faintly. "Good. Because I don't give pity. I give opportunities." Okonkwo blinked, unsure what she meant. "Who are you?" "My name is Madam Ifeoma," she said. "I trade in the city." palm oil, yams, cocoa, anything that brings profit. But more than that. She paused, eyeing him carefully. I know talent when I see it. You have strength, but more than strength you have pride. Pride that refuses to break. Okonkwo remained silent, his heartbeat loud in his ears. I will not promise you riches, Madam Ifeoma continued. But if you are willing to work harder than you've ever worked, I can show you a path. Slap closed one door for you. Perhaps I can open another. Her words lingered in the air like incense. Okonkwo swallowed hard. Why me? Because, she said softly, I once stood where you stand now. Humiliated, rejected, and someone opened a door for me. Now it is my turn. The following days brought new whispers to the village. Who is that woman always talking to Okonkwo? They say she's from the city. Maybe she's related to him. Related? Open your eyes. That one smells of business, not family. Chief Iza's household also buzzed with the gossip. Chief, one of his wives said, they say that city woman has been speaking to Okonkwo. Chief Iz scoffed, sipping his palm wine. Let her waste her time. That boy is stubborn like his father. He will end up with nothing. But deep inside, Chief Iz was unsettled. He knew Madam Ifeoma's reputation, sharp, cunning, and wealthy in her own right. If she had taken an interest in Okonkwo, then perhaps his nephew's fate was not as sealed as he thought. One evening, Madam Ifeoma invited Okonkwo to her small rented house near the edge of the village. Inside, her table was lined with ledgers, books, and letters, things rarely seen in a rural compound. Sit, she said, gesturing to a chair. Okonkwo sat stiffly, his eyes darting around. Tell me, she began, what do you want from life? Okonkwo hesitated. No one had ever asked him that. Not even his late father. He stared at the flickering lamp, then spoke slowly. I want to learn. I want to finish school. I want to become someone who cannot be ignored. Someone who will never beg again. Madam Ifeoma nodded, her eyes glinting. Good. Ambition. That is the beginning. She pushed a ledger toward him. Do you know how to read numbers? Yes, Okonkwo said cautiously. My father taught me before he died. Then start here, she said. Help me balance this account. Okonkwo bent over the book, tracing the figures with his finger. Within minutes, he spotted an error. Here, he said, pointing. This calculation is wrong. Madam Ifeoma's eyebrows lifted. Ah, sharp eyes. For the first time in days, Okonkwo allowed himself a small smile. From that night, his world began to shift. By day, he still carried loads at the lorry park. But by evening, he sat with Madam Ifeoma, learning about trade, accounts, and the ways of business. You see, Okonkwo, she explained one night, wealth is not only in land or cars. Wealth is in the mind. If you can master numbers, people, and opportunity, you can build an empire from dust. Take that again. If you can master numbers, people, and opportunity, you can build an empire from dust. Okonkwo listened intently, soaking in every word. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, one thing was clear. The slap that had once humiliated him was now leading him into something greater. Okonkwo had always believed that his destiny was bigger than the narrow paths of the village, but now, under the mentorship of Madam Ifeoma, he was beginning to see it take shape. Life was no longer just about survival, it was about transformation. The slap that had humiliated him had pushed him into a chapter he could never have imagined. And though the scar of that day lingered, it was slowly being replaced by a sense of purpose. Madam Ifeoma was unlike anyone Okonkwo had ever met. Born in the city but with ancestral roots in the village, she carried herself with elegance, yet her humility disarmed even the proudest of men. Her voice was soft but firm, and she had a way of turning even the simplest conversation into a life lesson. You must understand, Okonkwo, she told him one evening as they sat in her modest compound under the glow of a kerosene lantern. Education is not only about books. It is about opening your eyes, about seeing possibilities where others see limitations. A true education teaches you to think, to imagine, to build. Okonkwo nodded, listening intently. He was hungry for wisdom, not just food. Every word she spoke sank deep into his spirit, watering the seeds of resilience that had been planted by years of hardship. Under Madame Ifeoma's guidance, Okonkwo's days took on a new rhythm. Mornings were spent at the lorry park where he still worked, carrying goods and running errands to earn his daily bread. Afternoons, however, belonged to learning. She gave him old textbooks, tattered but rich with knowledge. She taught him mathematics by using real examples from her trade, balancing accounts, calculating profit, and measuring loss. She taught him English by making him read aloud newspaper cuttings she had collected from the city. At first, the words stumbled on his tongue, but she was patient. Each mistake was a step forward. With time, his voice grew steadier, his vocabulary wider. He began to see the world in a different light. Where once he only saw poverty, he now began to see potential. But the village was not silent. Whispers followed him everywhere. Some villagers mocked him. After all that disgrace, he still walks tall. Others pitied him. Such a fine boy, but his uncle has cursed him. And yet, there were those who secretly admired him. Look at him. Even shame did not break him. Perhaps there is something special about this one. Okonkwo paid no mind. He carried their words like dry leaves, light, rustling, but never heavy enough to crush him. One market day, as Okonkwo was busy offloading bags of rice from a truck, he noticed something strange. Chief Isa's convoy rolled into the square, cars shining under the sun, music blaring, praise singers chanting. The chief stepped out in full agbada, dripping with wealth. But the villagers' cheers lacked their usual fire. There was applause, yes, but muted. Respect, yes, but tinged with caution. For the first time, Okonkwo noticed something. His uncle's shine was fading. Not in money, for he still had plenty, but in honor. The story of the slap had spread wider than the chief realized. It had become a proverb on many lips. Parents told their children, "Do not slap away the hand that asks with humility." Elders shook their heads whenever his name came up. The slap was no longer just an action. It was a stain. That day, as Okonkwo lifted his load and watched his uncle parade through the market, he felt no bitterness. Instead, he felt a quiet resolve. One day, he thought, I will return to this market not with cars or agbadas, but with something that lasts longer. Knowledge to share, hope to give. Weeks turned into months, and Okonkwo's transformation continued. Madame Ifeoma introduced him to letters. How to write them, how to address them. She explained that scholarship sometimes came through the process of writing applications. His handwriting was shaky at first, but soon he was filling pages with his dreams. You must not only dream, Okonkwo, she told him. You must write your dream so the world can see it. She encouraged him to apply for every scholarship opportunity she heard of. Some letters received no reply. Some came back with polite rejections. But Okonkwo did not lose hope. Each rejection was like rain washing away doubt, making room for resilience to grow. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. A letter arrived with Madame Ifeoma's name scribbled across the envelope. She opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the paper before widening with joy. "Okonkwo," she exclaimed, "you have been offered a partial scholarship in the city. They will cover your tuition, but you must still find money for accommodation and food. It is not everything, but it is a door." For a moment, Okonkwo froze. His dream was finally within reach. His hands trembled as he took the letter. His eyes moved over the printed words, tears gathering at the corners. He wanted to shout, to dance, to run through the village declaring victory. But instead he whispered, "Thank you, Lord." That night he could not sleep. He lay on the mat in his small hut, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed the journey, the farm labor, the humiliating slap, the endless prayers, the whispered gossip, the patient teaching of Madame Ifeoma. Every struggle had led him here, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, he knew this was the beginning of something great. In another compound not too far away, Chief Ease sat sipping palm wine, oblivious to the letter that had arrived. He was still the chief, still wealthy, still feared. But slowly, the legacy of his wealth was being overshadowed by whispers of his cruelty. He did not know it yet, but his name was losing its sweetness in the mouths of his people. And as the moon rose high over the red earth of the village, Okonkwo made a silent vow. He would go to the city, he would study. He would rise, not just for himself but for every child who dreamed of more. The slap that was meant to break him had become the very push he needed. The rooster's crow broke the silence of dawn, but Okonkwo had been awake long before. He lay still, staring at the scholarship letter once again, as though afraid it might vanish if he blinked. The words were etched into his memory, yet he read them over and over until they no longer felt like paper but like prophecy. The village was stirring. Smoke curled from mud kitchens as mothers prepared yam porridge for the day. Children fetched water from the stream, their laughter echoing through the morning air. To everyone else it was just another day. But for Okonkwo, it was the day his life would begin to take a new shape. Still, excitement did not erase reality. The letter promised tuition but left him with the heavy burden of accommodation and feeding. Madam Ifeoma, ever the encourager, refused to let this mountain discourage him. "You have been given the key," she told him. "Now you must learn to open the door yourself." Okonkwo nodded, though doubt flickered in his chest. Where would he find the money? His uncle, Chief Ease, was the obvious answer, but the memory of that slap stung like fresh fire. To beg him again was out of the question. Instead, he turned to what he knew best: work. For weeks, he doubled his efforts at the lorry park. He carried sacks twice his size, swept the market square for a few extra coins, and even took odd jobs on nearby farms. Every kobo he earned was folded carefully into a small tin box beneath his mat. It was slow, but it was something. The villagers watched him with mixed feelings. Some shook their heads. "Does he think hard work alone will take him to the city?" Others whispered, "This boy has something inside him. Even disgrace could not stop him." As days turned into weeks, Okonkwo's small savings began to grow. Madam Ifeoma contributed too, sacrificing part of her earnings from her trading. "My son," she told him, "your success will be my greatest profit." Finally the day came. His tin box was heavy enough to pay for a bus ticket to the city and cover at least the first few weeks of meals. It was not much, but it was enough to begin. That morning, villagers gathered as Okonkwo prepared to leave. Some came out of curiosity, others out of genuine affection. Madam Ifeoma fussed over him like a mother hen, making sure his small bag was packed with essentials. 2 shirts, 1 pair of trousers, a pair of sandals, a Bible, and the scholarship letter. "Remember, Okonkwo," she said firmly, "the city is not only a place of opportunity, it is also a place of distraction. Do not forget why you are going." "I will not forget," he promised. As he boarded the rickety bus bound for the city, he caught sight of Chief Ease's compound across the road. The tall iron gates loomed proudly, but for once, Okonkwo felt no fear. He did not need to beg for what lay beyond those gates anymore. His journey was no longer tied to his uncle's wealth. The bus engine coughed to life, and the red earth road stretched ahead like destiny itself. Villagers waved, some with genuine joy, others with quiet envy. Madam Ifeoma's eyes glistened with tears, but her smile remained strong. The city was like nothing Okonkwo had ever seen. The air was thick with noise, honking horns, shouting traders, the hum of countless voices. Tall buildings rose where trees should have been. Buses swerved dangerously, and hawkers weaved through traffic, selling everything from roasted groundnuts to phone chargers. At first, Okonkwo felt lost in the chaos. But soon he remembered Madam Ifeoma's words. "See possibility where others see confusion." He gripped his bag tightly, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The school he had been admitted to was modest compared to the giant universities he had only heard of, but to Okonkwo, it was a palace of knowledge. The sight of students walking with books in their arms, talking about lessons and assignments, filled him with pride. He registered with the bursar, presented his scholarship letter, and received his admission slip. His hands trembled as he held it. It was more than paper. It was the evidence of his new identity. No longer just a village boy. Now he was a student. Accommodation, however, was another challenge. The dormitories were full, and private hostels were too expensive. For weeks, Okonkwo lived in the back of a small mechanic's shop, sleeping on a wooden bench at night after helping the mechanic with odd jobs during the day. He washed dishes in nearby restaurants for a plate of food, carried loads at the market, and saved every coin he could. Despite the hardship, he never complained. Each day he attended lectures with bright eyes, eager to soak in every word. He wrote notes carefully, even when his stomach rumbled with hunger. He made friends slowly, most of them surprised by his determination. One evening after class, a fellow student named Chuka approached him. "Okonkwo," he said, "you work harder than anyone I have ever seen. What drives you?" Okonkwo smiled faintly. "A slap," he replied simply. Chuka laughed, not understanding the weight of those words. But for Okonkwo, the memory of that humiliation was still alive, not as pain, but as fuel. Back in the village, whispers of his progress reached Chief Ease. At first, the chief ignored them, but as the stories grew louder, that Okonkwo had gone to the city, that he was studying, that he was making something of himself, the chief's pride began to itch. "Let him study," Chief Ease muttered to his friends over palm wine. "Books do not make a man. Money does." Yet deep inside, a shadow of unease began to stir. And in the city, as Okonkwo closed his eyes one night, lying on his wooden bench under the stars peeking through the mechanic's workshop roof, he whispered a vow. "I will not fail. I will rise. And one day, even my uncle will know that the hand he slapped was the same hand that opened doors." The semester moved quickly, and for Okonkwo, it was a season of fire and forging. Hunger, sleepless nights, and constant work became his daily companions, but so too did hope. Every page he read, every lecture he attended, and every note he scribbled felt like a stone laid in the foundation of the life he was building. Despite the hardship, there were moments of light. Chuka, the fellow student who had once asked him what drove him, grew close to Okonkwo. He often shared food with him, sometimes even smuggling an extra plate from the cafeteria. "Okonkwo," he would tease, "if your hunger could speak, it would ask for its own scholarship." Okonkwo laughed at the joke, but inwardly he was grateful. Friendship was a gift as precious as food. As the weeks turned into months, his lecturers began to notice him. He was not the loudest in class, nor the one with the finest clothes, but his eyes carried a fire that demanded attention. One lecturer, Dr. Adeyemi, even stopped him after a lecture one day. "Young man," he said, peering through his spectacles, "where do you come from?" "From Umuaka village, sir," Okonkwo replied respectfully. Dr. Adeyemi nodded. "I have taught many students, but few with your hunger for knowledge. Do not stop. The world opens its doors only to those who keep knocking." Those words rang in Okonkwo's heart for days. Back in the village, meanwhile, Chief Ease sat under the shade of his mango tree, surrounded by elders and admirers. Palm wine calabashes circled, and laughter rose with the smoke of roasted meat. Yet, for all the noise, Chief Ease's mind was restless. News had reached him again. Okonkwo had not only survived in the city, but he was excelling. The villagers spoke with pride. "Have you heard? Okonkwo, the boy who was slapped, is now top of his class. He did not need his uncle's wealth. God himself is his helper." These whispers stung Chief Ease more than the sting of palm wine. For a man whose pride was built on being the benefactor of many, It was unsettling to imagine someone rising without his help. His laughter grew louder around others, but inside, unease grew. Okonkwo, unaware of his uncle's turmoil, continued his grind. Each day was a test of endurance. He still slept in the mechanic's workshop, still worked odd jobs, and still fought hunger. But now there was recognition. The mechanic often told him, "You are not just a boy, you are a fighter. One day, people will point at you and say, 'That one was not born with a silver spoon, but he carved his own.'" The words comforted him, but they also planted a seed. Could he truly rise so high? Could he stand as a man whose name carried weight beyond his village, beyond even his uncle? His first exam results provided the answer. Okonkwo, the boy who had once begged for school fees, scored among the highest in his department. When he saw the result sheet pinned on the board, his heart swelled with gratitude. Students whispered in awe, lecturers nodded with approval, and Chuka slapped his back in celebration. That evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, Okonkwo stood outside the lecture hall and whispered a prayer. "Lord, let my success speak louder than my suffering. Let my story be proof that doors can open even when hands try to shut them." But success did not erase struggle. His savings dwindled faster than he could replace them, and often he faced days with no food at all. Yet he refused to borrow. Pride, or perhaps dignity, would not allow it. One night, while returning from the restaurant where he washed dishes, Okonkwo encountered a group of senior students gathered around a small fire, playing guitars and singing. They welcomed him to sit. The music was soothing, a balm for his weary soul. One of them, a final-year law student, told him, "Brother, life is not just about enduring pain. Learn to breathe, to sing, to dance, even when the world feels heavy. It is in those small joys that we find strength to keep moving." Okonkwo nodded, though he knew his path left little room for leisure. Still, the music stayed with him, echoing through his long nights. Back in Umuaka, Madame Ifeoma received a letter from Okonkwo. His handwriting was careful, his words humble, but the pride leapt from the page. She read it aloud to the women at the market. "Mama Ifeoma, I am doing well. The city is hard, but it has not broken me. I scored among the best in my class. I thank God, and I thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Please continue to pray for me." The women cheered, and Madame Ifeoma's chest swelled with joy. "Did I not tell you?" she said. "This boy is destined for greatness." The news spread like wildfire, further fueling the villagers' admiration, and Chief Iza's discomfort. One evening, as he listened to the talk of Okonkwo's success, his pride cracked and he muttered under his breath, "A boy I slapped is now becoming a man the world claps for." He laughed bitterly, but inside, the echo of respect had already begun to stir. For Okonkwo, the journey was only beginning. His eyes were now fixed on a horizon larger than even he could imagine. He was no longer running from shame. He was running toward destiny. And though he could not see it yet, the same slap that had humiliated him was slowly reshaping not only his life but the pride of his entire lineage. The rains had returned to Umuaka. The red earth darkened under heavy clouds, and the smell of wet soil filled the air. Children splashed through puddles, chasing one another, while elders huddled in verandas, sipping hot palm wine. But amidst the rhythm of village life, a different rhythm was stirring, one of whispers, pride, and awe. Okonkwo was returning home. Not as the boy who once begged, not as the boy who had been slapped, but as a man. His name now carried weight, for he had graduated with honors. His face had appeared in the university's newsletter. Lecturers spoke of him with pride, and his peers, once blind to the boy in torn sandals, now pointed him out as an example of resilience. The mechanic he had worked for, the restaurant owner whose plates he had washed, even the students who once mocked his poverty, all now looked at him differently. But nothing compared to the murmurs in Umuaka. "Have you heard? Okonkwo, Chief Obi's son, is coming home a graduate. Even without Chief Iza's help, he made it. What a testimony!" The villagers prepared for his arrival with joy. Some decorated the village square. Others rehearsed songs of praise. Madame Ifeoma, tears already in her eyes, gathered the women of the market. "This boy," she declared, "is proof that God never abandons the innocent." The day of his return arrived. Okonkwo entered the village, not in torn clothes, but in a clean shirt and simple but dignified trousers. He carried no wealth, no gold chains, no convoy of cars, but he carried something far greater: dignity, respect, and the story of resilience. Children ran ahead of him, singing his name. Women ululated, and men shook their heads in wonder. Some whispered, "This is the boy who was slapped." Others said, "That slap was a blessing in disguise." Chief Ease, meanwhile, sat in his compound, restless. He had heard the drums, the laughter, the praises. He had heard the name of his nephew rising higher than his own titles. His chest tightened. For years, he had prided himself as the family's provider, the man whose name commanded fear and respect. But today, respect was leaving his gates and gathering around the very boy he had humiliated. The elders urged him, "Go and greet your nephew. A victory for him is a victory for your family." But pride held him like chains. At the village square, Okonkwo was welcomed like a hero. The chief of the youth presented him with a talking drum, a symbol of honor. Madame Ifeoma, tears flowing freely, embraced him before the crowd. "My son," she said, "today you have shown us that poverty cannot chain a determined soul. May your story give light to generations yet unborn." Okonkwo raised his hands humbly. "My people," he said, his voice trembling but strong, "I left this village with shame burning on my back. I begged, I was rejected, I was humiliated. But I did not give up. And today, I return not with riches, but with knowledge. I return with a story that even the poorest among us can rise." The crowd erupted with cheers. Drums thundered and songs filled the air. Yet, even in the midst of celebration, Okonkwo's heart was not hardened. He thought of his uncle, the man whose slap had started this journey. A part of him longed for reconciliation. That evening, as the celebration quieted, Okonkwo walked to Chief Ease's compound. The gates stood tall, just as they had on the day he was struck. Guards hesitated but allowed him entry. Inside, Chief Ease sat in silence, his once proud face shadowed with regret. When he saw Okonkwo, he looked away. "Uncle," Okonkwo began softly, "I have come not to boast but to greet you." Chief Ease's lips trembled. His eyes glistened, though he tried to hide them. "Okonkwo," he said at last, his voice heavy, "that day, I thought I was teaching you a lesson, but it was I who learned. Your father gave me everything, his sweat, his sacrifice. And when it was my turn to give, I turned you away. Yet here you stand, greater than I ever imagined." Okonkwo knelt respectfully. "Uncle, I hold no bitterness. The slap that was meant to close my path became the hand that pushed me forward. I thank you because even in rejection, God's purpose was revealed." Tears fell from Chief Ease's eyes. For the first time in years, he embraced his nephew. The pride he had clung to melted into humility. The village buzzed with the news. Okonkwo and Chief Ease have reconciled. Elders marveled, women sang louder, and children danced. The story spread beyond Umuaka, of a boy who was slapped but rose to greatness, of an uncle who found humility in the success of his kin. From that day, Okonkwo's name carried a new weight. Not just as a graduate, not just as a survivor, but as a symbol of hope. Schools invited him to speak, communities called on him for guidance, and young people looked up to him as proof that their circumstances did not define their future. And as he stood before the villagers one last time before returning to the city, he said, "Never despise your small beginnings. Never give up because doors are slammed in your face. Sometimes rejection is the very force that carries you to your destiny. My uncle's slap was not the end. It was the beginning. And today, I stand before you as living proof that what man means for harm, God can turn for good." The crowd roared. The drums beat faster. And the story of the slap that opened doors entered the fabric of Umuaka's history, a tale that would be told for generations. Okonkwo's journey was not finished. Life still had trials ahead. But for now, he had carved a place in the hearts of his people. And every time the story was told, the slap that once brought shame was remembered as the spark that ignited destiny. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tales by Savvy Sam. And remember, your story isn't over. That pain, that disappointment, it might just be the beginning of something beautiful.